and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight Black Voices. I'm Brandis Friedman. Here's what we're looking at. An in-depth look at what the Chicago Police Department is and isn't doing to fulfill its reform mandate. A co-star and director of the landmark documentary Hoop Dreams join us to reflect on its legacy after 30 years.
It is an amazing opportunity for young people to be able to see themselves as astronauts.
And a soaring exhibit about black excellence in aviation. And now to some of today's top stories. Illinois Republican lawmakers say their requests to hold hearings about drugs entering state prisons via the mail have fallen on deaf ears.
Since late August, these events have put the facility on extended lockdowns and landed hard-working correctional officers in emergency rooms. The preliminary findings from Menard and other facilities across Illinois are alarming. Synthetic cannabinoids, chemicals found in insecticides, and even fentanyl have been recovered in some cases.
The GOP lawmakers say the Illinois Department of Corrections should be doing more to protect corrections officers and staff who are exposed to the drugs and even consider pausing mail delivery. They're calling on Democratic House and Senate leadership to hold hearings on the issue. Pilsen residents will have more access to mental health services at the public clinic in their neighborhood, formerly known as the Lower West Clinic.
That the reason why this clinic is reopening in a big part is because the black and brown communities came together to demand what their communities needed, and they got it together. And we need to remember that that is what happens when we act with solidarity.
The Chicago Department of Public Health cut the ribbon at the Pilsen South Ashland Health Hub to celebrate the expansion of mental health services at the facility, which already provided other preventative health care services. The Health Hub will offer behavioral health support for free by appointment for those facing emotional, traumatic, or behavioral challenges. Treatments can include individual or family therapy, medication management, and substance use treatment. Transgender activists and allies are calling out violence and discrimination against the community. Advocates are backing a resolution to establish a Transgender Day of Remembrance in Chicago to honor those killed each year as a result of violence against the trans community. The group also calls for more legislation and initiatives to protect the community while promoting inclusivity.
Over the next 4 years, we are going to stand up and fight back. We just saw Republicans scapegoat the trans community for the sake of winning an election. And I'm here to tell you this morning that we as trans people are a part of democracy too. We are a part of the American dream. We deserve adequate housing. We deserve equal opportunity to employment. We deserve the opportunity to walk down the street safely.
At least 36 transgender people have died from violence in the last 12 months, according to the Human Rights Campaign. The Chicago area could be seeing our first accumulating snow of the season tonight and maybe more wet snow tomorrow. The National Weather Service says roads could get slushy this evening. We'll see scattered snow showers overnight, mostly before 4 a.m. with blustery winds. Then tomorrow, more rain, possibly mixed with snow of up to 1 to 3 inches, possibly. Up next, why Chicago hasn't made more progress on police reform, right after this.
Chicago Tonight, Black Voices, is made possible in part by the support of these donors.
Five and a half years ago, the Chicago Police Department agreed to extensive oversight from a federal judge to address its record of brutality and civil rights violations. There have been hundreds of court hearings and hundreds more meetings. But according to a joint investigation from WTTW News and ProPublica, the record of actual accomplishment is meager. Joining us now with more are our own Heather Sharon And on Zoom, Vernal Coleman, reporter with ProPublica. Thanks to you both for joining us. Heather, let's start with you. Tell us exactly what this court order, the consent decree, is designed to do.
Well, a federal investigation found that Chicago police officers were routinely violating the civil rights of Black and Latino Chicagoans. And this court order, in its simplest form, is designed to lay out a roadmap to correct those problems. But as you said, more than 5.5 years later, the city has yet to address the central tenets of that agreement, which required the city to do 3 basic things. 1, create a plan for real community policing that links officers with community members to address public safety threats, that conducts a study to determine whether officers are properly deployed to fight crime, and 3, to create a system that flags officers who are the subject of more than one misconduct complaint or lawsuit and gets them retraining, discipline, or sanctions.
Okay, just yesterday we know that the federally appointed independent monitor, Maggie Hickey, shared more information about the progress of consent decree compliance. CPD has fully complied with just 9% of the consent decree requirements. We can see from the graph on the screen, 37% in secondary compliance, and preliminary compliance, only 45%. And then there's just 9% that's not in compliance at all. Vernal, who's responsible for this very slow pace of reform?
Well, as we pointed out in the story, none of the authorities in position of influence or oversight of the consent decree have effectively pushed the city on its lack of progress. Several police superintendents have come and gone since work on the decree began, without significant progress. There's the city council, which oversees the city budget, which has not really used its collective voice to call out the slow pace of reforms, or even when the city funds allocated to the effort have gone unspent. There's the monitoring team that oversees the decree that has not called for sanctions and get the city for its lack of progress. But the buck may stop with Mayor Brandon Johnson, who campaigned on succeeding where his predecessors did not, by quickly implementing the consent decree. That progress is yet to materialize, and with proposed cuts in the budget, it's really unclear if it ever will. And it's essentially, there's just been a lack of progress.
Yeah. City officials, they have set aside, as you report, of course, hundreds of millions in Chicago taxpayer dollars for this reform effort. Heather, break down that cost.
So since 2020, budget documents show the city has set aside a total of $667 million to implement these reforms. But in a first of its kind analysis by WTTW and ProPublica, we found that each of the past 3 years, the city has left nearly a quarter of that unspent, and that has certainly contributed to the delays, and we know that pattern is set to continue into this year, as Mayor Brandon Johnson, as Vernal said, has proposed slashing 79 vacant positions, and since those positions are vacant, we know that they have not been making progress on these really important reforms.
Has it worked, setting aside all of this money?
So it hasn't. Vernal and I talked to police reform advocates who say that this is really at a tipping point, that they are losing faith that reform is at the end of this road, and that there's a real sort of sense that an opportunity for reform is slipping away. And that's shown in what the monitors, which are charged with implementing the consent decree, have found. Surveys show people are losing faith in Chicago that anything will change with the police department. And even though excessive force complaints against Chicago police officers have dropped, overall complaints have risen.
Vernal, you spoke with residents on the city's far south side about whether the reforms have had any impact in their real lives. What did you find?
You know, I think they're frustrated. I think for a lot of them, job number one for the city's police department is reducing crime. But several of the folks that I spoke to said that that's impossible without better relations between the department and the communities that they serve. And you really can't create that bond when there's problems like disparities in traffic stops and some of the other constitutional policing issues that the decree is intended to address and alleviate.
The consent decree, it's been expanded 3 times, each time, Heather, in response to evidence of pervasive and ongoing misconduct by members of the Chicago Police Department. Has that worked?
It hasn't. We all remember Anjanette Young, who was left naked and pleading for help when officers raided her home mistakenly back in 2019. She had hoped that the consent decree process would allow her to advocate for real change, to make sure that nothing like happened to her ever happened to anyone else. But after years of negotiation, it didn't really result in any significant changes. And she told us that the city needs a plan B for police reform, because the consent decree isn't working. A similar thing is happening happening with the shooting of Dexter Reed, who was killed during a traffic stop. His sister, Portia Banks, desperately wants to stop Chicago police officers from stopping people as her brother was stopped. But she's not convinced the consent decree is the path to do it. But ultimately, she doesn't care. She just wants better things in place to prevent similar killings.
We also know that former President Donald Trump opposes federal efforts to reform local police departments. Vernal, what does that mean for Chicago's consent decree?
I think there are some authorities and people within the administration that are hoping that with a second Trump administration coming in, that there's a chance to clear the slate. But there's really any number of ways that a second Trump administration could make life more difficult for City Hall. Leadership, especially if they come to loggerheads over some other issue, there's some anxiety that the new administration could cut off certain streams of funding. Chicago Police Department, like many other large police departments, relies on federal funds to provide service. And should there be any animosity or any disagreement between White House and City Hall, Chicago City Hall, that funding potentially could be endangered as part of some sort of retaliatory effort by the new Trump administration.
Heather, what happens now?
Well, Mayor Johnson is under an incredible amount of pressure to reverse the cuts that he's proposed to the consent decree implementation process. So we will be watching very closely how that shakes out in the final budget decree. But whatever happens, unless significant change happens, the city is on track to spend in the neighborhood of $200 million every year indefinitely until they get these reforms in place to the benefit of the federal judge, who of course at any moment could order sanctions or other punishments for the city for failing to live up to what it promised it would do in the consent decree.
Yeah, at this snail's pace indefinitely certainly seems like a possibility. Hope it doesn't come to that. Heather Sharon and Vernal Coleman, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And you can read Heather and Vernal's full story on our website. It is all at WTTW.com/news. And we're back with more right after this. Six years, 2 high schoolers, 1 game. That was the winning combination for the groundbreaking documentary Hoop Dreams, which just turned 30 years old. The story follows 2 Chicago teens with dreams of making it in the NBA in the early 90s. But what viewers came away with was so much more. Here with more are a couple of the film's main players, and by that I mean director and producer Steve James and co-star William Gates. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us. Congrats on 30 years. Steve James, let's start with you. When you created this film, did you have any idea that it would have such a long-lasting impact at the time?
Oh, no, I mean, it started as a half-hour short we were going to complete within 6 months. That didn't work out, thank God. And then when it was going to come out, it was a 3-hour documentary about 2 guys most people had never heard of, pursuing this basketball dream. And we thought we'd be lucky to get a decent time slot on PBS, much less have it be talking about it today.
Steve, how is this film? Why do you think it is still relevant today?
Well, I think it's relevant for a lot of good reasons and maybe some not so good reasons. I mean, I think William and Arthur's story is amazing, and they're amazing guys, and their families are amazing, and they allowed us in such a beautifully intimate and honest way that to tell their stories, I think was a timeless kind of story to tell. Their pursuit of the dreams and all the obstacles that they faced as families and as players. But I think part of those obstacles, which are still with us, is part of why Hoop Dreams still has relevance today. I mean, the city of Chicago, like many big cities, is still struggling with a lot of the same issues of poverty and racism and inequity that we saw back then. If anything, in Chicago, things have gotten worse in a lot of the neighborhoods. I mean, Arthur's West Side neighborhood, West Garfield Park, is a ghost town compared to what it was when we were filming. There's been such an exodus of people out and desperation there. Marshall Metro High School, where he went to school, I think probably has about 50 kids in it now. It had 1,700 kids when we were filming. So, and Williams' neighborhood has changed dramatically in ways you could say are good and not so good. So its legacy is partly that as well.
Yeah, the remains of Cabrini Green are no more. It is quite different. Of course, you're referencing your other co-star, Arthur Agee. Couldn't be with us tonight, but we've got William Gates. William, you know, considering that making it into a sports league for almost anybody, it's like a 1 in a million shot. Do you think we are still, or that we're still encouraging young people to pursue sports or music as a way to escape poverty that we maybe should be reconsidering?
I don't think we reconsider it. I think it's part of our fabric. I think it gives us life as a kid growing up. I remember being that 14-year-old kid looking out my neighborhood window, and I used to be able to see the John Hancock building. And I saw the white lights at the top. And that's really where the dream started. I'm like, I want to live up there one day. And I saw basketball as a path to get there. And if I think anything, I think we need to invest more in it. But I think we need to do it in a way that's healthy. I don't know always the way for that to look like that, but I think the dream to make it in life, whether it's academics, whether it's athletics, let's push them both.
Okay, yeah, so let's encourage the dream, whatever the dream might be, whether it is basketball or any other sport or something academic. How do we encourage, you know, young Black men to consider those dreams too?
I think the way that you do it is kind of like what we saw when Arthur and I when we dedicated the court over there in Garfield Park. To me, that symbolized, let's get back to the grassroots approach. Let's get kids back out on the playground. I think that's one way to, you know, take the communities back. You know, we heard Steve just talk about a few minutes ago. Some of the things have not changed, but I remember there was a time when I was playing that it was actually a safe haven to go to the playground. I think that needs to be, you know, revisited and opened back up again, because I think all kids deserve the opportunity to grow, to build, be inspired, and live out their dreams. So hopefully we can get them back out there, back outside again.
Yeah, you mentioned that basketball court, and I want to come back to that before we let you go. But Steve, you went into making this film in pursuit of a story about future NBA players. Obviously, you ended up painting a much more complete picture with themes of poverty and drug addiction, gangs, and violence. Definitely, I saw some cultural differences between different kinds of schools. What were the challenges for you as a filmmaker?
Well, I mean, I think part of the challenge for me and my colleagues, Frederick Marks and Peter Gilbert, was that, you know, we didn't grow up in these neighborhoods. We were white filmmakers coming into a situation that was very different from our own lives. I think the common bond for us with Arthur and William and their families was a love of basketball. You know, I wasn't nearly as good a basketball player as William or Arthur, although I did beat Arthur one-on-one once.
He's not here to defend himself, Steve.
he hates when I bring that up. But I think basketball became this common bond, but it also then opened up an avenue for us to really come to understand by spending the time there and spending years there with their, you know, with their openness to us to really witness some of those things that we captured in the film.
William, I think a lot of people probably want to know, what was your life like after the film?
You know, interesting enough, it's I kind of like, I took the opposite route. I kind of like ducked underneath the film and really hid from the spotlight of the movie, because my mindset went to, I got a family, I need to raise my kids, I just gotten married. So I took life a little bit differently. But in terms of, I can say this now, in terms of the 30 years, I truly enjoy being a part of everything that Hoop Dreams has done for my life, because it's opened up doors that probably would have not been opened up or easily opened up had it not been for the movie itself. Doesn't mean that all the life challenges disappeared, but it has given us a leg up in life. Not just me, but Arthur and his family, and I see it in my kids now.
William, you spend some of your time talking to young people today. What is the message that you give them when they're considering pursuing a sport or any dream of theirs?
Well, here's the message I give. I pick a book from my older brother Curtis, God rest his soul. And Curtis said, "Use the game, don't let the game use you." And the thing that I took away from that is, like, I'm honest with all of the people that I speak to and say, "Hey, Hoop Dreams at its core, I'm just saying this at its core, it's a basketball movie." So Arthur and we didn't achieve the ultimate hoop dreams of playing in the NBA. But along the way, we discover new dreams about ourselves. We discover new aspects about ourselves, and it created new visions for us. So I'm honest with them and let them know that, hey, making it in sports, making it in entertainment, the odds are slim. Don't mean you can't beat the odds. So you shoot for it. But at the same time, along the way, grab all the other things that can help you grow in life, that can help you build in life. And as you're pursuing that dream, watch it blossom right in your face.
Yeah. Take all of life's other lessons along the way. Steve, before we run out of time, you ended the film with a soundbite from William saying, "If I don't make it in the NBA, are you going to remember me?" What would you say the message that you wanted viewers to take away from the film is in about 30 seconds?
Well, when William said that to us when he was up at Marquette, I remember saying to Peter, "That's the last line in the movie." And that's because I think William really summed up both the sort of lure of the dream and pursuing the dream, but also an understanding that he showed of its limitations, and that there's more to this than making it to the NBA. There's more to life than making it to the NBA.
Okay, and we're just out of time, but William, really quick, I did want to mention that you and your co-star Arthur, you gifted the West Side with an artfully refurbished basketball court. I know that, and we're looking at a quick picture of it right now. I know that was something that was important for you all to do, especially as you're working with the young people. We have to leave it there. My thanks to Steve James and William Gates. Congrats on 30 years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Hoop Dreams is available on a number of streaming services. You can watch it there. Coming up, though, Soaring high at the Chicago Children's Museum. We explain. Look up. The Aim High Soaring with the Tuskegee Airmen exhibit is flying high at the Chicago Children's Museum. The interactive space encourages play as a tool to learn so kids can imagine themselves as little aviators as they learn more about Black heroes in aviation and aerospace.
We have had literally thousands of kids and families from across Chicagoland who've been able to enjoy not only the opportunity to learn about the science of aviation and aeronautics and astronautics, but to also be able to learn about the history of the Tuskegee Airmen. Since we've opened this exhibit, the reception has been incredibly enthusiastic and warm. From noted Chicagoans like John Rogers Jr., whose father was a Tuskegee Airman, all the way to young children in school groups across Chicagoland who have made their way to the museum. It is an amazing opportunity for young people to be able to see themselves as astronauts, as aviators, as people who may go into careers in the aerospace industry. And this particularly being anchored in an exhibit around Black voices and Black history in that field is especially meaningful. We have seen people want to edit and rewrite history and make it less than factual. So to have a space where Black children can come and see people who look like them with melanin on the record, not just out in the street or playing basketball or whatever the popular press would like to depict Black people as doing, but to see them as historical figures going into outer space, as historical figures fighting in the military, as historical figures who were aviators, scientists, true heroes, American heroes. We see people like Ronald McNair, who was on that ill-fated mission on the Challenger in 1986. We also see regular quote-unquote black faces, like the first all-black female crew of flight attendants. History has passed, but the future is still to be shaped. And so this is a place where we want play and learning to connect so that the bright young minds of tomorrow will find their place in the story of human progress.
Aim High, Soaring with the Tuskegee Airmen is on display at the Chicago Children's Museum through January 20th. And that's our show for this Wednesday night. Be sure to sign up for our email newsletter, The Daily Chicagoan, at WTTW.com/newsletter. And join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm committed to giving back to the community through law and philanthropy.